Hello there once again. Today we're going to be looking at an exciting topic. But before we go into this exciting topic on discussion on the biology, I want to ask a few questions, or just probably one. How do xerophytes adapt to their environment? How do xerophytes adapt to their environment? Now, you might have heard, actually, the word might sound very strange to you, but most of you might not know that you have xerophytes some places around your houses, and some of you use it as ornaments in decoration of your houses. Xerophyte, an example of a xerophyte is the cactus plant. And I know most of you have cactus plants in your houses in terms of decorating your environment. Now, cactus is an example of xerophyte. Now, a xerophyte is actually a plant that can live successfully or can survive in places that are extremely dry, like the desert, where you have drought. They can survive in an extremely dry place. So those types of plants are called xerophytes. Now, we also have some plants they also call Mesophytes, and we also have the one we call Hydrophytes. Now, Hydrophytes are actually found in all plants that can survive or live successfully in wet places, or you can call it in aquatic places. And we're going to be looking at some of them. And like we have the water lettuce, we have the water lily, and so many of them, they can be found in watery environment or in aquatic environment, while we have mesophytes, they can exist or they can live successfully in places that do not have much water and they do not have much land. Okay, so you can say mesophytes are plants that we can see all around us. Okay, so they are mesophytes. And in this particular topic, we're going to be looking at how these plants, not just only plants, how animals, they adapt to this particular environment. Now, looking at the xerophytes, xerophytes have structures. Okay, they have structures which we can call adaptive features that helps them to adjust to their particular habitat or environment they find themselves. Now, we have just finished discussing the topic on tolerance, and in this topic we made mention of organisms being able to withstand certain changes, and somehow tolerance is actually related with adaptation, in the sense that in adaptation the organism don't only just withstand, but they adjust to these changes. They make it a part of their daily living. Okay, so they adjust to these changes, and one of the ways they adjust to these changes is them developing structures and behaviors which we can call adaptive features that helps them withstand or adjust to certain changes in their environment. And so today we're going to be looking at the topic adaptation part 1. Now, we're in part 2, we're going to be looking at other aspects or the different types of adaptation. We're going to be talking about colorative adaptation, behavioral adaptation, and so many other things. We're going to even be talking about social animals and so many things we're going to discuss, so many exciting things we're going to be talking about on the adaptation 2. But in adaptation 1, we're going to be looking at how living organisms, mostly both plants and animals, adapt or adjust. What are some of the structures that must be in place for these living organisms, plants and animals, based on especially how these living organisms adjust to these and their environment, either aquatic or terrestrial, as well as arboreal. And we're going to pick some few organisms, probably some plants and also some animals, and look at how these organisms adapt to their own environment. So that's what we're primarily going to be discussing in this particular topic. But before we begin to look at some other things or some things about this particular topic on adaptation, I'd like us to look at some specific objective. Now, the specific objective has to do with things you should be able to know at the end of this topic. One of them, you should be able to define what adaptation is. And if I may add, also mention or state the purpose for adaptation. Number two, you should be able to outline the adaptation of animals to aquatic habitat. Adaptation of animals to adaptive habitat. You should also be able to outline the adaptation of animals to terrestrial habitat, and also number four, be able to outline the adaptation of animals to arboreal habitat, and number five, outline the adaptation of plants to aquatic as well as terrestrial habitat. And then we're also going to be looking at some special organisms, both plants and animals, and how they adapt to their own particular environment. We're going to be talking about, we're going to be looking at the fish, we're going to be talking about the birds, we're also going to be talking about the frog as in terms of animals, and then we're also going to be talking about xerophytes, and then we're also looking at hydrophytes and some of their adaptive features. Now, please take this particular topic very, 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 very important, because if you check most WEAC past questions, mostly as it relates to practicals. Or in fact, there is no year when practicals are being conducted is in terms of the SSCE or the WEAC, NECO, and then WEAC. Every time practical questions are given, questions on adaptations are usually asked. Structural adaptations, behavioral adaptations, they are usually asked. This particular topic is going to help you build your knowledge on practical aspects in biology. Now, let's quickly look at one or two things relating to this particular topic on adaptation part one. Now, what is adaptation? By definition, adaptation can be referred to as changes in the structure, function, and behavior of an organism in order to adjust or survive in its environment. I repeat, it has to do with the changes in the structure, in the function, in the behavior of an organism, and the full main purpose is to actually survive or adjust to its own environment. Or you can say that adaptation is the ability of living organisms to adjust to their environment based on certain structures, functions, and behaviors of that particular organism. Okay, based on this. So in other words, when we are looking at adaptation, we're actually looking at the environment. We're also looking at the response of these organisms, and we're also looking at features that are available for the organism to actually adjust and survive in that particular environment. Now, from the definition, you can agree with me that the main purpose for adaptation is for these living organisms to adjust or to survive in their environment. The ability of these living organisms to survive long enough in their environment in order to reproduce successfully and also ensure their continuity of life. So that is all about adaptation. Now, if you also look at the definition, we said that these are changes in structure, functions, and behavior. These changes in the structure, in the function, in the behavior of these living organisms are what we call adaptive features. Now, when we're talking about organisms, we mean all organisms. It includes both animals and plants. It includes animals and plants. Now, let's take a look at some adaptations or adaptive features of some animals, of most animals, to terrestrial or aquatic habitat. Now, the first one we're going to be looking at is adaptation of animals to aquatic habitat. to aquatic habitat. And when we're talking about aquatic habitat, we're actually looking at the sea, we're looking at ocean, we're looking at the fresh waters, we're also looking at the brackish water, the fresh water, which includes the rivers, the ponds, the streams, and so on, the brackish water, which is the same as the estuarine habitat. So how does living organisms, mostly animals, survive, are able to adjust or survive in that particular habitat? Now, one of the adaptive features is that they possess what we call streamlined bodies. Now, these streamlined bodies are found in most organisms that are called aquatic organisms, or most aquatic animals. So they possess streamlined bodies, and these streamlined bodies are for easy movement in water. Easy movement in water. Number two is that these organisms possess fins. Now, you've noticed if you get a fish, you will notice that a fish possesses fins. Fishes, they possess fins, and the fins is usually for movement. The fins are for movement. And also, you can also see in some organisms like the toad and the duck, they possess what we call webbed feet. Webbed feet. And these webbed feet are also for easy movement when they are in water. Now, number three adaptive features that can be found in animals that live in aquatic environment or habitat is that they possess gills. They possess gills. You can locate the gills in tadpoles. You can see gills in tadpoles, which are young toad and frog. You can also see it in fishes at the side, mostly in terms of a fish. You see it at the side of the fish, and it has a cover which is called the upper column. When you open it, you'll see the gill chamber. Inside the gill chamber, we have the gill rakers, we have the gill arch, we also have the gill filaments. They are all located in the gill chamber. Now, the major function of the gill chamber is for gaseous exchange. For gaseous exchange. Now, before I proceed on other adaptive features, please note this. Whenever you are mentioning any adaptive feature, don't just stop at the name of the adaptive feature. Please go ahead to tell what is the function of that adaptive feature. For instance, I can't just, it's not right or it's wrong for me to say they possess gills and I stop there. No, please ensure you tell the functions of each of these parts or adaptive features. So if I want to, the correct way to say it is that they possess gills for gaseous exchange, not just gills for just they possess gills. No, please. So number four is that they possess air bladder. Now the purpose for air bladder is for buoyancy. You also see that in fish. You also see that in tadpole. They possess air bladder for buoyancy. Now, what is buoyancy? Ability to float in water. And lastly, they possess suckers or hairs for attachment to vegetations so as to avoid being swept away by water current. And you see that in some animals like the crustaceans. You see that in some animals like the hydra that is found in water. They possess suckers or hairs for attachment to vegetations so as to avoid being swept away by water current. So these are some of the adaptive features of animals in aquatic habitat. Now let's take a look at adaptation of animals to terrestrial habitat. How does animals, which includes man, okay, man is found in terrestrial habitat. Now, how do we adapt, including other animals, other mammals? We have the reptiles and so on. How do they adapt? How do they adjust? How do they survive in terrestrial habitat? One of the adaptive features is that they possess powerful limbs. They possess powerful limbs. It can be the forelimbs and it can also be hind limbs. They possess powerful limbs, both fore and hind limbs, for movement. They possess powerful limbs for movement. And you can see that in reptiles. You can also see that mostly in mammals. We also have number 2, they possess lungs for gaseous exchange. They possess lungs, which is a respiratory organ that is usually found in birds. It is also found in reptiles, and then also found in mammals. Also, lungs can also be found in amphibians, okay? So they possess lungs for gaseous exchange, all right? So the next one is that they possess sweat glands for excretion and for cooling. Now you see that sweat glands mostly in mammals. An example is man or humans. Humans, we have sweat glands, and the sweat glands is a means of excretion. If you check our videos on excretion, we said that one of the organs for excretion is the skin. The skin, and what does the skin excrete is sweat. In our subsequent videos, in videos we're going to see much later, we're going to be looking at the skin, and we're going to look at parts of the skin. We have the dermis and the epidermis, and we're going to see where the sweat gland is actually located. So the sweat gland is, the major purpose for the sweat gland is for excretion. And one of the importance of excretion is that it brings about cooling. It brings about cooling of the organism. All right. Next on the line, which is next adaptive features of animals to terrestrial habitat, is that they possess hairs in terms of mammals and feathers in terms of birds for regulation of body temperature. So in some mammals, you find them possessing hairs, and some mammals possess what we call furs, F-U-R-S. Okay, furs. Now, furs and hairs or feathers, they are for regulation of body temperature. And then lastly, they possess skin and cuticles to protect and prevent drying up or injury. Now, the skin is also to protect delicate parts of the body, as in terms of mammals and other vertebrates. But in terms of insects, they possess what we call cuticle. Now, this cuticle helps to prevent them from drying up and also protect them from injury. So that is some of the adaptive features. There are so many adaptive features, mind you. They also possess eyes for sight, for seeing, so as to escape danger, to also see their prey and also escape predators. So we have so many adaptive features for living organisms, or mostly animals, to terrestrial habitat. But we're just taking these few. Now we also have other aspect of it. We also have adaptation of animals to arboreal habitat. To arboreal habitat. Now, what is arboreal habitat? Now, the term arboreal relates to trees. It has to do with trees. Now, so it simply means that arboreal habitat has to do with a place or trees where living organisms can be found, mostly animals. All right, so we can say arboreal animals are animals that move about or live on trees. And of course, we know so many of these animals. We have the baboons, we have the monkeys, we have the birds, and so many other organisms. Some snakes can also be found living on trees. These are called arboreal animals. They are called arboreal animals, and they have several adaptive features that helps them live in their habitat, which is the arboreal habitat. One of the adaptive features that ensures their survival and successful living in these arboreal habitat is that they possess wings for flight. They possess wings for flight. And you can see that mostly in birds. They possess wings for flight. Another one is that they possess what we call hollow bones. And these hollow bones makes them light, so they can be carried by the wind. So they are not heavy, okay? They are not dense. So they have hollow bones, which helps to make them light. And you can also see these hollow bones in birds. They also possess bright colors for camouflage. An example is the chameleon. The chameleon has the ability to blend, change its color in order to blend to its environment. And one of the reasons why it does this is to escape danger, also to escape predators, So they possess bright colors for camouflage. Another adaptive feature is that they possess streamlined bodies for easy flight in the air. Mostly you see this in birds. Birds, they also possess streamlined bodies for easy movement or flight in air. And then finally, they also possess powerful limbs. They possess powerful limbs, they possess claws and prehensile tails for climbing. Now you see that mostly in monkeys, you see that in baboons and so many other chimpanzees. They have strong, powerful claws. They have limbs, powerful limbs, from which they climb trees and swing from one tree branch to another. You also see them having what we call the prehensile tails. The prehensile tails helps them to move from one branch to another. So these are some of the adaptive features that some animals, which we can call arboreal animals, have in order to adapt and survive in arboreal habitats. Okay, now we've talked so much about, we've discussed so much about animals. Let's take a little turn and discuss a little about plants. Plants also show certain adaptive features to some certain adaptive features to aquatic habitat as well as terrestrial habitat. Now let's look at adaptation of plants to aquatic habitat. Number one is that they possess what we call waxy cuticle. Now, waxy cuticle, they are waterproof like membrane or substances you see on the epidermis of leaves of plants. Now, why are they there? They are there to prevent wetting of the leaves. Have you noticed that sometimes when when rain falls on some parts of the leaves, you'll find out that the leaves are not soaked or wet? The reason is based on the presence of these waxy cuticle. Now you can see them in water lettuce. Water lettuce is also a plant that is located in water. Also, another adaptive features you can see in aquatic plants is that they possess air floats. They possess air floats in the leaves and stems, and these air floats are for buoyancy. Of course, I said buoyancy is the ability of an organism, either plant or animal, to float in water. And you will see that in water hyacinth. So water hyacinth, they have this. Now, aquatic plants have the ability to tolerate mud that is saturated with water and nearly devoid of oxygen. Please take note of that. They have that ability also. And then also another adaptive features that you can see or locate or can be observed is that they possess what we call breathing roots. They possess breathing roots. Now, as the name implies, breathing, it is for gaseous exchange. And you see that in the white mangrove. The white mangrove and the red mangrove, you can also see it in a Raphael palm. Now, the white mangrove, they are usually found in the estuarine habitat or the brackish waters. Then also another adaptive features of plants to aquatic habitat is that they possess what we call adventitious roots. They possess adventitious roots, and these adventitious roots is for the absorption of water, as well as mineral salts. And also they possess airspace in the tissues for buoyancy. You can also see that in water lettuce. Another thing again that you can also spot is adaptation of plants to terrestrial habitat. It means that plants also can be found in terrestrial habitat. Of course, we have them scattered all over around us here. We have trees, we have plants, flowering plants, and so on. Now, what are their adaptive features? What are the adaptive features of these plants to terrestrial habitat? Now, one of them is that they possess extensive root system for anchorage and also for water absorption. Now, one of the major functions of roots of plants is for anchorage and also for absorption. We have different types of root system. We have the taproot system, we have the fibrous root system, we have the adventitious root system, and so on. So you find mostly the taproot system found in terrestrial habitat. That means plants with taproot system. Example is the mahogany. So mahogany is mostly you see them in rainforest zones. So they possess extensive taproot system, and it is usually for anchorage and also for water absorption. Another adaptive feature you can find in plants is that they possess thick barks on the stem to protect the internal tissues. Thick barks. The bark is not spelled B-A-C-K, but B-A-R-K. So they possess thick barks on the stem, and it is there to protect the internal tissues of these plants. Also, they possess numerous leaves. Now, what is the major functions of the leaves is for photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, actually the site of photosynthesis is the leaves of plants. And if you look at most terrestrial plants, they possess numerous leaves. Mostly plants that are found in the tropical rainforest, they possess numerous leaves, and these numerous leaves, one of the advantage of having numerous leaves is to enhance photosynthesis. Another adaptive feature is that they possess what we call succulent stems to enable them to store excess water. Now, you see that mostly in desert plants like the cactus. You have the oleander, and so many of them, they have the ability to they possess succulent stems. They even possess spikes on their leaves so as to reduce transpiration. We're going to be looking at, so they possess scanty and tiny leaves. Some of them possess scanty and tiny leaves to reduce water loss by transpiration. So these are some of the adaptive features possessed by terrestrial plants to help them adapt to terrestrial habitat. Now, quickly, let's look at some special adaptations of some organisms. Special adaptations of some organisms. Now, mostly in terms of SSCE or WEAC or NECO, sometimes they bring questions relating to fish. You see that sometimes they might ask for might present a specimen, and that specimen might be tilapia fish, and then you might be asked a question: give mention 3 structural adaptation of specimen so and so for movement. Now we have adaptation of tilapia fish for movement. Now, one of the adaptive features that helps for movement in tilapia fish is the presence of what? Fins. The presence of fins. And the fins is for movement in water. Another special adaptive feature that is found in tilapia fish that enables its movement is the presence of streamlined bodies. Now, the streamlined bodies is for easy movement in water. Number 3, we also have, they possess lateral lines. Now, these lateral lines, they help for the detection of vibrations. So if there are vibrations in the water, the tilapia fish is able to detect these vibrations using their lateral lines. Now, they also possess large eyes to see predators and also locate their prey easily. Number 5 is that they possess what we call swim bladder. Now, this swim bladder is also for buoyancy in water. Now, another important adaptive feature that is being possessed by tilapia fish is that they possess silvery white color of the body below, and then there is also a black above it. Now this is a form of what we call counter shading. It helps to prevent it from being seen by enemies, And since they can't be easily seen by enemies, it simply means they can move easily and freely in water. So this is also another important adaptive features possessed by tilapia fish to be able to survive in aquatic habitat. Now, next is adaptation of birds for flight. Adaptation of birds for flight. Now, birds, of course, we know they are vertebrates and they are usually boral animals. They are boral animals. Now, birds, they possess feathers. As you can see, they possess feathers, and mostly the feathers are for regulation of body temperature. Another adaptive features they possess is wings. They possess wings for flight, and of course, we have different types of feathers that are found in birds. In our and when we start looking at adaptation 2, we're going to be looking at the different types of feathers like the quill, the plumule, and also many of them, philoplum, and so many other types of feathers. Then we also have another adaptive feature is that they possess streamlined shapes, and these streamlined shapes of the body is for easy flight in air. And then also they possess light body weight, also for easy flight. These are some of the adaptive features of birds to a boral habitat. And then also we have adaptation of tapeworm to its habitat, which is the guts of humans. Adaptation of tapeworm to its habitat, and the habitat of tapeworm is its host, or the intestine of its host. Now, one of them is that they possess hooks and suckers for attachment. Hooks and suckers for attachment to the intestinal walls of their host. Another one is that they possess large surface area to allow absorption of food from the guts. And also another adaptive feature is that they possess thick cuticles. And these thick cuticles is to protect them from the host and digestive enzyme, so that the host digestive enzyme won't start attacking their tissues. Okay, so these are some of the adaptive features of tapeworm to their habitat, which is the guts of their host. Another one is adaptation of toad. We're going to be looking at adaptation of toad for food. We're going to look at it for protection and also for movement. Now, toad shows several adaptive features when it comes to getting or accessing their food. One of them is that they possess a special olfactory organ. Now, olfactory has to do with the sense of smell. So they possess special olfactory organs for smelling their food. Another one is that they possess long, sticky tongue for catching and holding their prey. They have long, sticky tongue. You see that both in toad as well as in frog. Another adaptive features of the frog for protection this time, what we have looked at is for food, for obtaining food, but this time it has to do for protection. Now, they possess long limbs with powerful muscles which help them to jump or hop away from predators. Another one is that they possess webbed feet for efficient swimming in water. And then finally, they possess streamlined bodies for easy movement in water. So these are three important adaptive features of toad towards protection, of toad for protection. And then also we have adaptive features of toad for movement. Okay, we've mentioned that of movement. Okay, for protection, they possess slimy skin, which makes them difficult to be caught by predators. they have slimy skin, they secrete mucus, which makes their skin to be slimy and helps them to be, they can be easily grasped by their predators. Another important adaptive feature is that they possess poisonous glands on their skin, mostly the toad, which makes them poisonous and distasteful to predators. And also the last one is that they possess, or their color can be altered, just like that of the chameleon, to match with their background. Also, it is for protection so that they can be easily spotted, detected, or seen by their enemies or predators. Okay, so these are some of the adaptive features of the toad for protection. And then before we go, let's take a look at adaptive features of hydrophytes. Remember, I told you that hydrophytes are actually organisms or plants that are found in water. That is, they live successfully in water, plants that live successfully in water. Now, these plants have several adaptive features. Examples of these plants, we have the water lettuce, we have the water lily, we'll have the water hyacinth, and so on. We have also, what they call this, we have the white mangrove. These are some examples of hydrophytes. Now, what are the adaptive features they possess? One, they possess numerous adventitious roots and root hairs which aid absorption of water as well as mineral salt. Also, they possess large airspace which helps for buoyancy. And also they possess waxy upper surface of the leaf to prevent clogging of the leaf by water. So these are some of the adaptive features that are present in hydrophytes. And then finally, adaptive features of xerophytes. Remember I said that xerophytes, they are actually plants that can live successfully in extremely dry places. I gave you an example of the cactus. We have the oleander and so many other types of plants that live successfully in extremely dry places like the desert. Now, what are some of their adaptive features? Now, one of the adaptive features is that they possess reduced number of stomata to prevent excessive loss of water. Now, why reduced number of stomata? Remember, stomata, they are actually openings or cells. They are made up of guard cells which open and close. And the opening and closing of the guard cells brings about transpiration. Mostly the opening of the guard cells bring about transpiration. So if there is great number of stomata in a particular plant, it means that transpiration will be high. And transpiration is the loss of water in the form of water vapor through the leaves of plants. So a reduced number of stomata in turn results in reduced water loss. Another adaptive feature is that they possess thick succulent leaves for storing water. You see that mostly in cactus. You see that in so many other plants having these features. Also, they possess long taproot system to help them obtain water from great depths of the soil. These are some of the adaptive features of xerophytes. Now, this brings us to the end of this particular topic on xerophytes or on adaptation. But before we go, let's look at some few questions involving adaptation 1. Now, look at this question. When large number of organisms share limited space and resources, the immediate result is what? Of course, the immediate result is competition. Number 2, which of the following features is not an adaptation of plants to aquatic habitat? Is not an adaptation of plants to aquatic habitat. Number 1 says, or option A says, breathing roots for entry of air. Of course, it is there. Flowers are raised above water to attract pollinators. Very correct. C says spongy tissues containing gases for buoyancy. Very correct. And D says hairy structures on the leaves to reduce water loss. Now, there is no reduction in water loss as it relates to plants that are found in aquatic habitat. In fact, there is high rate of transpiration, not reduced transpiration, high rate of transpiration. So the correct answer to this question is option D. Now look at question 3. Which of the following term ensures the survival of an organism in the environment? And that really explains adaptation. It really explains adaptation. Question 4, special modifications which enable an organism to survive in its habitat is known as, of course, it is also adaptation. Question 5, which of the following best describes the adaptation of earthworm to its habitat? Earthworm to its habitat. Now, A says living in burrow during the day to prevent desiccation. Now, desiccation has to do with drying up, to dry up, or to lose water or moisture from its body. So that is the correct option. Option A is correct. They live in burrows, that is in holes in the soil during the day to prevent desiccation. B says burrowing into the soft ground to store food. That's not really it. And C says possession of segmented body to reduce movement is not true. And then D says possession of few bristles. Bristles are like hair-like structures that earthworms and most worms use for movement, not for defense. So the correct answer is A. Thank you for participating in today's class. You can practice more questions using your ExamGuide app. The app scores and gives a detailed explanation of all the questions at the end of your practice test. You can also learn particular topics of interest with different modes like study mode, mock mode, and even practice mode. It also has other features that makes learning very fun. Now, it is a must for all serious students. Download from www.examguide.com if you don't have it yet. See you in the next class. Don't forget to subscribe to our channels, hit the notification bell, and share the videos to your loved ones and friends that will benefit from it. Bye for now.